Are you tired of your A/B test failing? Are you tired of small wins or no wins at all? In the last 3 years, I've only had one failing test after running hundreds of tests. And today I'm going to teach you the 4 steps you need to get consistently winning tests in your testing program. The steps and methodology I'm going to teach you will help you know how to avoid failing tests. In the industry, though, you hear the exact opposite. Even people who've done a lot of A/B testing, they say their solution to failing tests is to be persistent, to be patient, and you're going to fail most of the time, but overall, every now and then you'll get some wins, and those wins over time will start to build up. I don't believe that. The industry says that failing tests are okay, that it's normal, you should expect that. In fact, here's some examples of them saying it. The blog on Convert.com says 7 out of 10 A/B tests fail. Convert.com looked at their data and they saw that 70% of their tests that they had run, or that were run by individuals, were failing tests. On a blog on VWO, they say 1 out of every 8 tests have driven statistical significance. Here's a couple other examples from YouTube. This guy says he doesn't like split testing, and here's why.
Just ask anyone who regularly runs split tests, and they'll tell you, big wins like that almost never happen. You'll find that you'll need to run 20, 30, or 100 tests before you ever see a result like that. And even when you do achieve that result, you'll find that a huge jump in conversions quickly regresses back towards the mean.
Here's another example from the Thrive Themes creator, and he's a fan of A/B testing. He does a lot of A/B testing, but he has this expectation that if you think you're going to win with your tests, you're prepared to be disappointed. Listen to what he says.
The majority of A/B tests actually don't lead to a significant or certainly not to a dramatic result. Meaning, even if you test 2 completely different pages, more often than not, you will find that both pages perform about the same.
So again, you have the industry saying most of your tests are going to fail. The solution to that is to be patient, to keep testing, and eventually those little wins that you come every now and then will build up over time and they'll be worth it. And honestly, I think that's a lame solution. Patience is a good thing, but there are things you can do now to be able to get winning tests consistently in your testing program. Today, I'm going to teach you the 4 steps of things you need to do. And to preempt this, the first 2 things I'm going to teach you are more generic, high-level things that will take time to build in your testing program. The second 2 things are applicable to every single test you run. The first thing you need to get winning tests over and over is discipline in your testing program. Now, this is a larger thing. This isn't done overnight. This isn't done on an individual test basis. To get discipline in your testing program, it involves so many things. Things like making sure you decide a single success metric before you run a test, making sure you understand variance for the site and the thing you're about to test. Running tests for the right reasons, not to prove yourself right or to protect egos or to appease the hippo or to appease your manager or your boss. Having discipline in your testing program is things like focusing on efficiency, focusing on rules of action. There's so much that goes into a disciplined testing program, and that's the number 1 step because there's so much that will make you or break you at this phase before you even decide what you're going to test, before you decide your variations, before you even get to looking at your results. If you fail at the beginning with no discipline, you're going to fail with every test. You're going to fail with your results, and you'll never have winning tests. So step number 1 is to make sure you have a disciplined testing program, and there's so much that goes into that. The second step to get consistently winning tests is to have direct causal discovery to learn the order of influence. Now, what I mean by this is you can't just test random things on your site. You can't just use random data sets to know where to test either. You have to use direct causal discovery by running tests to understand the order of influence and the things that matter most on your site. If I were to say, hey, what are the most important elements on your homepage? If you don't know the answer to that, then you haven't followed a direct causal discovery approach. And that's different than saying, what are the things that are most used on your homepage? Like, I don't want to know where people click and what they do. I want to know which elements are most important. And then I might say, and how do you know the correct order and the correct layout of those elements? Do you have direct causal data to say, this is the right order of those elements that matter most? I might also ask you which pages are most impactful for your visitors, and are they in the right order? And again, that's not which pages are used the most based on your analytics. This is direct causal discovery to know, having tested those pages, you know from a causation factor which pages matter most, which elements matter most, are they in the right order, do they have the right layout, do they have the right presentation? So step number 2 is using causal discovery to learn the order of influence to know what things matter most on your site. And again, this isn't something that's just done one and done. This is something that's part of your testing program that you do step by step overall. But one of the reasons why people fail with their tests and they don't get results is because they test things that don't matter. They haven't learned through causal data and discovery the things that matter most on their site, and so they're testing things that don't matter in the first place. Okay, the next 2 steps are things you can actually do with your specific tests you're running. Step number 3 to get more wins more often is to make drastic changes with your testing. This is partially common sense. If you make a small change in your site and you expect to see a large increase in conversions revenue, that's probably not going to happen. Every now and then you might get lucky. You might tweak a button color, you might tweak a headline, you might change some colors or a subtle image, and you might see a lift. That can happen sometimes. But the reality is that's the majority of the tests that people are doing. They'll use a testing tool that allows them to change headlines on the fly, or change some text on the fly, or change an image or a color. And so what marketers do is they go in and they make these changes that are very subtle, and they wonder why they're not having large lifts. Here's a blog post by VWO. In the same article where they're saying 1 out of every 8 tests win, they're showing an example of tests they thought would win. If I back up a little bit and I look at these variations, I call this a 10-foot rule. If I can't see a difference after 10 feet away, then likely that's not going to make a difference on your site because people don't notice that difference either. These variations look exactly the same. What they've done is they changed a headline. They're like, hey, why didn't the headline win? It was such a great headline. Why wasn't there a lift? Well, clearly it was because you didn't make a drastic change. And so this subtle change had a subtle impact, or in fact, no impact on the site. Don't be enamored with small changes until you know that those changes matter, those elements matter. Start with the bigger changes, zoom in where you find value. Step number 3 is to make drastic changes in your tests. If you want drastic results, you have to make drastic changes. The 4th step to increase the likelihood of getting wins is to have more variations. To be clear, I don't mean more tests. I'm not saying run more tests. I'm saying with each test you run, you need to have more variations. Now, the caveat to this is that sometimes you're limited by traffic. If you have a low traffic site or a low traffic page you're testing on, well, clearly you don't want to run more variations, because if it's going to take you 6 months to get results, that's not a good solution. This is only relevant if you have enough traffic. But if you don't have enough traffic, you might be asking, well, are you testing in the right spot in the first place? So make sure you have enough traffic to do this. But step number 4, again, is have more variations with each experience. The reason why this is so important is because if you have 1 variation or 2 variations, that's easy to do. And in fact, the creativity to come up with 1 variation is simple. My 7-year-old can do it. If you have 5 variations or 10 variations, you're getting to the point where you push the bounds of creativity. And when you push the bounds of creativity, what you're likely to find is one of those creative solutions that you came up with is more likely to be a winning experience. Let me show you an example of a real data set. This data set comes from a blog post on Conversion Excel by Andrew Anderson. In this graph, you can see there's 8 variations. If you look at the graph, you can see that most of them are about the same. There's a couple that are low. There's several that are kind of in the middle range that are kind of next to each other. But there's one variation that killed them all. It destroyed it. It was way above. That's the power of doing more variations. If you hadn't had that one variation, you might have had a mediocre test. Yeah, maybe there was a slight lift. But when you force yourself to be creative and force yourself to come up with more variations, you're much more likely to have winning solutions. It's also just simple math. If you have 2 things you're testing, 2 variations, well, you have a 50-50 chance of finding a winner. If you have 3 variations, your chance of finding a winner jumps from 50% to 66% because it's 33, 33, 33. And so your chance of winning has increased. If you have 4 variations, you now have a 75% chance of winning. So the more variations you have, the more likely you are to find winning experiences. Most people fail because they don't have enough variations they're testing, which doesn't force them to be creative. They don't use the mathematical odds of winning in their favor. So those are the 4 things you have to increase the likelihood of finding test-winning variations every single time you run a test. Number 1, you need to have discipline in your testing program. Number 2, you need to make sure that you're looking for the order of value and using a methodology to explore and discover using causation and causal data, not just analytics. Number 3, you need to make bigger, drastic changes, and that will increase your likelihood of getting drastic wins. And number 4, you need to make sure you have more variations with every test you run to increase the odds of winning, to increase your creativity, and make sure you're doing that where you have enough traffic to do it. Thanks for joining me today. I hope that you apply these 4 steps so you can get more wins with every test you do. If you like what you've seen here today, hit the like button. You can also subscribe to my channel and join me at testingtheory.com where you can learn more about better testing principles and practices to get better results with every test you do.